2023 has been one of the craziest years in gaming. It will go down as one of the best years ever because so many great games released this year. We got brand new IP, we got long-time requested sequels, and we got some high-quality remakes to further cement those all-time classics. I feel like 2023 had a little bit of something for everybody, and I personally feel like each platform brought something interesting to the table. So as we wind down 2023 and really look into next year, I want to talk about 15 games that stood out to me this year. This is a celebration of 2023 and some of the best games that it had to offer. Now, do keep in mind, though, that this is only my opinion. Your favorite games might be a lot different than mine, and just considering the sheer amount of games that released this year, I mean, there was no way that I was going to be able to include every single game on this list. So, with that out of the way, let's just go and jump right into the list, starting off with a runner-up, and actually a game that I just recently finished being Jusant. Now, from the very first moment that I saw this game, I was intrigued. It's such a unique game that revolves around climbing this massive mountain with this magical little creature that you carry around. There's really no words or detailed dialogue. It's just strictly gameplay. It's kind of simple on the surface, but there's really no other game out there that plays quite like it, and that's something that really hits home with me. I like when we get these fresh new ideas in gaming, especially when it's well executed. Jusant, though, it's almost like a relaxing therapeutic venture. It kind of reminds me of games like Journey, Abzu, or even Eco to an extent. It's a story that unfolds through its world, and that's also another part of this game that really stood out to me. For a game that's simple on the surface, it does throw new ideas your way quite frequently. Each chapter offers a different style of environment and a new gameplay mechanic. Now, I do feel like they missed an opportunity to fully utilize those mechanics with more of a challenge. But at the end of the day, this is a game that really stood out to me in 2023. Number 15, Diablo. I'd say that Diablo 4 is a game that's had a bit of an up and down here. It started out great, then there was some patches, and that made some people mad, and now it seems like they're back on the right track once again. I do, however, believe that this game will continue to get better and better because more content is planned for 2024. However, the base game is already worth jumping into as is. It has a rich story that'll take you around 26 hours to complete. Though if you want to dive in further, you can easily get 100 plus hours out of this game. It's got an addictive quality to it with all of its different character builds, and truly that's always been one of the fun parts to the Diablo series. Finding those unique builds to make your characters as powerful as you possibly can, and there's some creative ways to do this. As an added bonus here as well, Diablo 4 is one of the better cooperative games on the market that you can play right now. Number 14, I actually have two games here because this year has been fantastic for turn-based RPGs. So there's been a lot of choice for this genre, and two games that sits at the top of that list actually plays very similar to one another, being Sea of Stars and the game that it was inspired by, Mario RPG. Now, you really can't go wrong with either one of these games, though I think that their strengths do differ from one another. While their combat is similar in how they're both interactive, Mario RPG never really takes advantage of that system. It's a very easy game. I wish they would have offered a challenging mode, whereas Sea of Stars, it will ask more of the player. So I do think that Sea of Stars has the more enjoyable combat of the two games, but what Mario RPG lacks in challenge, it more than makes up for in its charm. Now, I never fully played through the original, so I never completely understood why people love this game so much, but now that I have, I completely understand the adoration for this game. It's the characters and just the strangeness in how Square Enix brings the Mario universe to life. They do it in almost unexpected ways at times, and by the time I finished Mario RPG, I left thinking to myself, this will be one of the most memorable Mario games that I'll ever play, and that's a true testament to its writing and its characters. Now, Sea of Stars, however, is also very well written. I really enjoyed its characters as well. I mean, come on, look at the art style in this game. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it really is an instant classic for the JRPG genre. It combines the best of games like Chrono Trigger with the Mario RPG series. Number 13, Armored Core 6. From Software has really made a name for themselves over the last decade with the Soulsborne genre. They have legitimately made some of the greatest games of all time, hands down, and they've more than earned their reputation. But they tried something just a little bit different this year. In a way, you can say that they kind of went back to their roots because Armored Core is officially back with a brand new entry, and boy, did they do a good job in reviving it. The speed and the power that you feel from these giant mechs as you zip around, it very well might be the best mech game ever made. It is unapologetically challenging, and it has those thrilling boss fights that fans have come to expect from FromSoft. But something that they don't get near enough credit for is their customization. When it comes to Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Elden Ring, or whatever, there's so much player customization with all of the different builds that completely changes how you approach its combat. Well, in Armored Core 6, it takes that customization to just insane levels. You can customize every part of your mech. You can design them with whatever color paint that you want. You can texturize them. You can add decals, and so on and so forth. They really encourage you to experiment in this game because one solution might not necessarily be the best solution for every single level. So if you enjoy customization, you can spend hours playing around in Armored Core 6 and then be rewarded with just absolutely fantastic gameplay. Number 12, and unfortunately this one quietly has fallen into the background, being Octopath Traveler 2. As I said, it's been a great year for turn-based RPGs, and ultimately, Octopath Traveler 2, it is one of the better takes on this genre. It takes that HD 2D art style that we just love so much, and it brings the golden age of the genre to 2023 with a brand new game. Now, personally, I was not a huge fan of the original because it lacked cohesion. Now, the idea of these games is that you have 8 different characters with 8 individual stories. They travel together, they fight with one another, but they all have their own unique story to complete themselves. In the first game, while there was a lot to like about that, there was something missing with the overarching connecting story. In Octopath Traveler 2, though, it takes that format and it fixes that problem. It feels much more fleshed out, and I think the story is much more rewarding this time around. So if you like this genre, I feel like Octopath Traveler 2 has a lot to offer, and truthfully, I'd say it's a must-play. Number 11, and this one has to be the most polarizing game of 2023. Now, I think some of that is fabricated from the ridiculous console wars that's never ending. That's for a different topic, but of course, I'm talking about Starfield. Now, right away, I will say that there are some flaws with this game. It's why it's not ranked higher. I think the space exploration is lacking, and the menus far too often take you out of the game. I'm also not a big fan of the choice to lock consoles at 30 frames per second. However, beyond those things, I did enjoy Starfield. Now, if you simply rush through its story and that's all you want to do, then I don't think that this is a game for you. Starfield is really at its best when you soak in its massive universe and all that it has to offer. There's just so many surprising stories that unfold as you simply explore it. I can't tell you how many times that I got sidetracked in this game and then completely set out on a new adventure because its side stories are just that interesting. It's why it's so easy to put 50 or even 100 plus hours into Starfield and still feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I think for the base game, Starfield has a lot to offer, and I'm actually really excited to see what comes next. Bethesda still has more content planned, and mods are on the way next year, which could really open this game up as we've seen with just so many Bethesda games in the past. Number 10, Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 in its entirety is a fantastic game. It really takes everything that you loved about the first game and it expands on that. If you like swinging around the city, well, you can now glide as well. I do firmly believe that Spider-Man has the best traversal system in all of gaming. You get where you want in no time flat, and it's simply fun. Then there's also the combat. In typical Insomniac fashion, it's just a blast to play. It's not overly complex, but it gives players a ton of gadgets to truly feel like a superhero. They even had some new combat styles with a couple surprise Spider-Man suits that you unlock as you progress through its story. I'm not going to spoil that for you because I think it's some of the better parts of Spider-Man 2. I also think that it mostly has a really well-told story, especially between Peter Parker and his best friend, Harry. They are easily, in my opinion, the highlights of the story. I also thought the villains were portrayed very well, but There was one part of the story that really left a sour taste in my mouth, and that was none other than Mary Jane Watson. She is so terribly written in this game that it does stick out to me like a sore thumb. I feel like the story could have been better if they would have just used some common sense with her character. The things that she does makes no sense whatsoever, and it drags down an otherwise great story. Nonetheless, I'd say outside of that, it's still an amazing game. It's a lot of fun to play. I like the overarching story as a whole, and if you like the first game, it's basically that, but with better gameplay. Number 9, Dead Space. I think it's so easy to say that the original is one of the greatest horror games ever made, because it really is, and the remake, it truly does make it even better. Remakes for horror games specifically, I think, makes a lot of sense because so much of these games rely on visuals, their sound design, and atmosphere. And thanks to the power that these modern platforms have, Dead Space was brought to life in a whole new way. It's scarier than ever before. The claustrophobic environment that it's so popular for is so much more lifelike in the remake. That would mean absolutely nothing, though, if it wasn't for its gameplay. I think one of the reasons Dead Space stands out so much is because of its combat and how unique it is. It's not just your typical zombie game where you mostly aim for the head. Instead, it's all about dismemberment. It adds a different form of strategy to its gameplay, and it really is just as fun to play in 2023 as it was all of those years ago. I mean, it was already one of the best horror games back then, but I'd say that the remake, it really just made it better in every way imaginable. Number 8, Pikmin. It was a very special year for the Pikmin series because they released Pikmin 1, Pikmin 2, and a brand new entry being Pikmin 4 for the Nintendo Switch. In fact, the entire Pikmin series is available on the Switch, which is pretty cool to see. Now, the thing that I really enjoyed about this year, though, is that fans are finally starting to notice that this series is secretly one of Nintendo's best franchises. Now, my personal favorite in the series is Pikmin 1. I really enjoy the time management in that game, but I think Pikmin 4, being the newest entry, is really good as well. It brings some new ideas to the table, including a new camera angle that brings you closer to the action than ever before. I do feel like that kind of adds a whole new layer to Pikmin because you play as these miniature beings, and seeing everything from their point of view, it's a sight to behold. It's just such a beautiful world filled with wonder. Pikmin 4, though, also added the addition of an alien dog-like companion. This really speeds up the action and gives you another strategy to utilize. I do ever wish that they would have given players the option to customize the game a little bit more. Pikmin 4 did add auto-aim, which in some ways I will say is useful, but it's also kind of a nuisance at the same time. It would have been nice to be able to turn that on or off to play more like the previous games, but at the end of the day, the Pikmin series continues to be a unique and great experience. Number 7, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. In some ways, they took the world and the ideas of Breath of the Wild and they solidified its open world formula in Tears of the Kingdom. For as good as the first game was and is, there has been some pushback from old-time fans on the direction that they took with the Zelda series. Yes, it's more free than Zelda has ever been before, but it doesn't have those classic dungeons, and its replacements being shrines wasn't super great in the first game. In Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, however, they majorly upgraded its shrines. I genuinely enjoy its shrines this time around because they feel much, much better. Now, I still don't think that they're as good as the classic dungeons, but it was a big step up, and they also included the addition of temples as well. Now, this is kind of their take on those classic dungeons, and even though I feel like it's still not quite the same caliber, it, however, is a big improvement over Breath of the Wild, and I do still think that it's well made. Tears of the Kingdom also has a ton of content because now you have the surface world, you have the sky world, and on top of that, you have an underground world to explore as well. It's honestly crazy how much they packed into this title, and it'll easily be a game that people play for years and years to come because there's just so much to uncover. So while I myself might prefer the classic games, Tears of the Kingdom is still a fantastic game that everybody should check out. Number 6, I have another remake here being Resident Evil 4. Now, despite me being a 90s kid, I never really had that nostalgic attachment to the original Resident Evil games the way some other people did. With the remakes, however, they have quickly turned me into a major Resident Evil fan to the point that I probably rank them in my top 25 games of all time, including the Resident Evil 4 remake. The remake is honestly one of the greatest games that I have ever played, and I do believe it's much better than the original. If you go back to play the original, its controls are a little bit clunky. The remake, though, completely fixes that problem, and they also made it a point to make it scarier. Now, I'm not saying that it's a super scary game or anything like that, because it's really not, but its atmosphere feels fantastic. It really ramps up the tension. The game itself is also a ton of fun, and on top of that, it has a captivating story. I love the characters in this game, the way it all plays out. I like the boss encounters, and this really is just a special game from top to bottom. To make things even better, though, they've since added the Ada Wong expansion titled Separate Ways, and it's only $10. I mean, we have so many other studios out there overcharging for just a little bit of DLC, but Capcom, they came out here with a beefy story expansion for only $10 extra. I keep saying it, but Capcom truly is right now one of the best game companies in the entire game industry. All right, now here we are in the top 5, and to get things kicked off, I have Boulders Gate 3. Now, admittedly, I haven't played this game as much as what I'd like, so this ultimately could end up being higher on the list when all is said and done. That's kind of been one of the struggles this year because it's been difficult to keep up with all of these great games, but I wanted to give this game recognition because there is a reason that this game is so beloved. Its turn-based combat is absolutely excellent. It's got an expansive world. It's got memorable characters, a captivating story. There's a ton, and I mean an absolute ton of player choice with actual consequences. Its visuals look great, and if you like the options to have relationships in games, well, yeah, they got plenty of that as well. Boulders Gate 3, in just a lot of ways, feels like it has absolutely everything imaginable that you need for a great RPG, and it's all so well executed. Now, personally, I'm not overly surprised by any of this because Larian Studios, even before Boulders Gate 3, was already making great RPGs. Divinity Original Sin 2 was already one of the best RPGs around, but now more people are starting to notice with Boulders Gate 3. I think this game will ultimately be viewed as one of the greatest RPGs ever made for a very long time. Number 4, Final Fantasy 16. I know, some people are going to scoff at this one. I know not everybody loves its more action-driven gameplay, but I still thought it was a lot of fun, and the story blew me away. I love the characters and the direction that they took with its more mature approach, and by the end of the game, I was scouring the internet to know more. That's when you really know something affected you, and I think its story is one that I will think about for years and years to come. But like I said before, I do understand that it is a full-on action game this time that more resembles Devil May Cry than the classic turn-based combat that Final Fantasy is just so well known for. For me personally, though, I'm okay with that just because Final Fantasy has always changed its combat from game to game, and I thought that the way they handled the icon powers in Final Fantasy 16 expanded on the lore and the universe. Icons have long been a part of the Final Fantasy universe, but in 16, it felt like that they were more alive. They were more connected to the actual story, and I just feel like it brings an entirely new dynamic to its universe. And I'll also say this, the further you get in Final Fantasy 16, the better it feels. It does actually start to feel more like an RPG when you get later in the game as it becomes more challenging and you'll need to experiment a little bit more. But that is one of the issues that I had with this game at the same time. The first playthrough is just not very difficult, and you don't unlock a harder difficulty until you beat the game at least once. I feel like that was a mistake. I think that extra challenge right away would have been appreciated, but nonetheless, this easily was one of my favorite games of 2023 and a game that will long stick with me for much of the same reason that other Final Fantasy games have in the past. I love its world, I love its characters, its story, and I thought it was a lot of fun to play. Number 3, Lies of P. Now, I knew when I first saw this game that it looked good, but even then, I don't think that I was prepared by how good it would end up being. Like, we've had a lot of Souls-likes over the years, but for whatever reason, most of them end up being middling. Lies of P, though, it's not only a good Souls-like, but I'd actually say its quality is right up there with FromSoft games. I mean, it takes a lot of inspiration from their games, especially Bloodborne, but it's also not a carbon copy either. It does try new things, and in some ways, it even improves on the Soulsborne experience. They do try to encourage a more aggressive approach. They have some new combat mechanics, and I have to say, the world is something to behold in Lies of P. It's set in the universe of Pinocchio, so you'll recognize certain characters, but it puts this new dark twist on things, and it's really interesting to see how it all unfolds and why these puppets have turned into craze killers. It's just such a good game from top to bottom. Don't sleep on Lies of P because it quietly, right now, is one of the best games this year had to offer, and I mean, that's saying a lot considering just how stacked this year has been. Number 2, the biggest surprise of the year that just kind of came out of nowhere, HighFi Rush. Now, when this game first dropped, I knew it looked good, but I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I mean, this is a game developed by Tango Gameworks, a studio that was previously known for making horror games. But here you have this charming, over-the-top, colorful game that combines rhythm-based gameplay, platforming, and hack-and-slash elements. And you know what? They absolutely crushed it. First off, this is one of the most unique games that was made in 2023, and coming from somebody who's played countless games since the 90s, I like when we get fresh new ideas, especially when it's as special as it is in HighFi Rush. It's just a pure joy to play from beginning to end. The characters are likable, the story is fun, it pokes fun at corporate culture, and it also has a lot of replayability because it's just fun to play. Now, there is a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to this game, but the more I played, the more I enjoyed it. Like there's just something special about this game, and even after finishing it, I still come back to this game from time to time because it is one of the most fun games that I've played, not just for this year, but I'd say for the entirety of this generation thus far. So not only is this my number 2 game on this list, but I think it's also one of Xbox's all-time great first-party games. And at the number 1 spot, I have Alan Wake 2. I mean, this was a tough choice, but I mean, I've been waiting for this game for 10 years. It's been a long, excruciating wait to see what's next for Alan Wake after the infamous cliffhanger that it ended with in the first game. So there was a lot of expectations, a lot of emotions built up for the sequel, and not only did Remedy deliver, but in my opinion, they exceeded expectations. Alan Wake, and you don't see this happen very often in franchises, but somehow they completely shifted genres, as it is now a legitimate horror game and a very spooky one at that. It deals with cults, murders, and dark presences. It can legitimately be scary at times, but it's also the most creative horror game that I've ever seen. It's unique, it's weird, it's bizarre, it's crazy, and most importantly, it's memorable. It really, truly does stand out, and a part of that is because of how layered its story is. Now, if I compared it to any other game, though, it does play similar to Resident Evil 2 Remake, just a lot more bizarre. It has a similar save system, it has item management, and it also has dual protagonists. You play as an FBI agent in her first lead case, and boy, is it a crazy one. Then Alan Wake is in a parallel world, dealing with the dark presence as he tries to write his way out of a true horror story. It's all connected, and it's just a wild ride. By the time I reached the end credits, all I could kind of think to myself was, please, don't make us wait another 10 years to see Alan Wake 3. There you go, though. There's my top 15 games for 2023. Technically, actually 17. We did talk about 17 games in this video because it really has been a fantastic year for gaming. Hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And actually, let me hear your favorite games in the comments below. I expect your alls to be quite a bit different because I think there's so many deserving games this year to top that list. With that said, though, Happy New Year's, everybody, and until next time, peace out.